Hey, what's up, my friends? Grant Baldwin here from the Speaker Lab. Welcome back to another speech breakdown, where today we're going to be taking a TED Talk from Julian Treasure, who's talking about speech patterns and how to become a more effective and more powerful speaker. So he gives a lot of different ideas here, and he does give a lot of different ideas. So that's one of the things we're going to be talking about, is how to minimize those things so the audience knows exactly how to take those ideas with them when they leave. The other thing we're going to talk about here is how he is using acronyms and how powerful it is for remembering what a speaker is referring to or talking about. The final thing we're going to be talking about here is how he uses an exercise, a little interactive activity at the end that engages the audience, and why to do that at the end and not at the beginning. So a lot of good stuff here. Let's get right into it in today's speech breakdown.
The human voice. It's the instrument we all play. It's the most powerful sound in the world, probably. It's the only one that can start a war or so.
Now, really good job of coming out and just going right into the talk. One mistake that a lot of speakers make, especially newer speakers, is when you're uncomfortable as a speaker or you're a bit nervous, sometimes you'll come out and you'll just kind of ad-lib, do some crowd work, so to speak, where you're like, hey, I'm super excited to be here. This is really cool. I'm on the TED stage. This is awesome. And there's so many people I want to thank for being here. I love this city. I love Scotland. Scotland's such a cool place to be. And he's just like going on and on and on. And those first few moments of a presentation are the moments that you have the audience's attention the most. Because at this moment, we have no idea where this talk is going to go. We are not entirely sure what the talk's going to be about. We have no idea if it's going to be interesting or sad or funny or humorous, or we have no idea what this talk is going to be about. So in this first few seconds, we're really, really locked in and engaged. And oftentimes, attention level is going to go down from this point. So these first few moments are powerful to grab the audience's attention, hook them in, and then keep their attention as he progresses in the presentation. So coming out, planting, delivering a couple key lines, and continuing on is a great way to start.
Say, I love you. And yet many people have the experience that when they speak, people don't listen to them. Why is that? How can we speak powerfully to make change in the world? What I'd like to suggest, there are a number of habits that we need to move away from. I've assembled for your pleasure here 7 deadly sins of speaking. I'm not pretending this is an exhaustive list, but these 7, I think, are pretty large. Habits that we can all fall into. First.
Now, let's talk about one of the challenges when you're doing a long list of things. So I'm going to give you today the 7 habits of this, or I'm going to give you the 10 steps to that. If you're doing that, especially like in this TED Talk format, where you're doing 7 steps in the matter of about 10 minutes or so about 1 minute per step or so, or if you're in a bigger audience and you're doing, or a bigger keynote and you're doing, let's say, here's my 10 top tips for, whatever it may be, remember that the audience is going to remember like 1, maybe 2 of the things that you're talking about. So there's a danger in going with too many things. I'm going to give you all the things I know on this topic versus like I'm really going to go really, really deep on this one specific thing so that you know this one thing when we leave. So instead of taking 7, what if he just took 1 and really doubled down on that and spent his whole time really drilling in this one key principle or this one key idea? So there's pros and cons both ways, but just as a speaker, something to be aware of there, to not try to cover too much material to the point where the audience is like, I don't remember most of what he said, and I just remember, these 1 or 2 key pieces.
Gossip. Speaking ill of somebody who's not present. Not a nice habit, and we know perfectly well the person gossiping 5 minutes later will be gossiping about us. Second, judging. We know people who are like this in conversation, and it's very hard to listen to somebody if you know that you're being judged and found wanting at the same time. Third, negativity. You can fall into this. My mother, in the last years of her life, became very, very negative, and it's hard to listen. I remember one day I said to her, it's October the 1st today, and she said, I know, isn't it dreadful? It's hard to listen when somebody's that negative. And another form of negativity, complaining. Well, this is the national art of the UK. It's our national sport. We complain about the weather, about sport, about politics, about everything. But actually complaining is viral misery. It's not spreading sunshine and lightness.
Now, obviously, he's speaking here in the UK, so this joke is going to resonate, this joke is going to land. But if you're going to be speaking internationally, you want to make sure that you're really aware of what that culture is like, what that climate is like, what humor may work in one part of the world may not work in another part of the world. So complaining is something that's somewhat international, but it may be more so in other parts of the world than others. So if he said the exact same line in a different part of the world, it may not be as funny because that part of the world may not be known for complaining as much as a different part of the world.
Excuses. We've all met this guy. Maybe we've all been this guy. Some people have a blame thrower. They just pass it on to everybody else and don't take responsibility for their actions. And again, hard to listen to somebody who's being like that. Penultimate, the sixth of the seven, embroidery, exaggeration.
All right, so let's go back to what I talked about at the beginning. We're 6 in right now. How many can you name? Just without looking, without going back, we are within the past 2 minutes. We're 2 minutes in. He's given us 6 of them. How many can you name right now? I'm not even going to try, but not very many, right? So again, just a good example of the more things you try to throw out there, we think like we're giving the audience more to like chew on or process, but the reality is like they're going to remember fewer of those things versus if we said, I'm going to spend all my time camping on this one key thing and make sure I drill deep on that.
It demeans our language, actually, sometimes. For example, if I see something that really is awesome, what do I call it? And then, of course, this exaggeration becomes lying, out and out lying, and we don't want to listen to people we know are lying to us. And finally, dogmatism. The confusion of facts with opinions. When those two things get conflated, you're listening into the wind. You know, somebody is bombarding you with their opinions as if they were true. It's difficult to listen to that. So here they are, 7 deadly sins.
Did you have all 7?
These
Did
are
you
things
remember them?
I think we need to avoid. But is there a positive way to think about this? Yes, there is. I'd like to suggest that there are 4 really powerful cornerstones, foundations, that we can stand on if we want our speech to be powerful and to make change in the world.
Okay, let's go back to what we just talked about, right? I've given you seven kind of negative habits of speech. Now I'm going to give you 4 cornerstones. So we're up to 11 things. Now, obviously, people aren't going to memorize all of these. He's not expecting people to memorize all of these. But again, the more lists, the more things you're throwing out at the audience, the less likely they are to remember any of them.
Fortunately, these things spell a word. The word is hail, and it has a great definition as well.
Now, if you're making it into an acronym, it's a lot easier to memorize, right? Because if we go back to that previous 7 list, we're trying to remember 7 individual words, which we're probably not going to be able to do. But if we have an acronym to go off of, we'll remember hail, and we'll probably be more likely to remember what the words are that are coming off of those 4 letters.
I'm not talking about the stuff that falls from the sky and hits you on the head. I'm talking about this definition, to greet or acclaim enthusiastically, which is, I think, how our words will be received if we stand on these 4 things. So what do they stand for? See if you can guess. The H, honesty, of course. Being true in what you say, being straight and clear. The A is authenticity, just being yourself. A friend of mine described it as standing in your own truth, which I think is a lovely way to put it. The I is integrity, being your word, actually doing what you say, and being somebody people can trust. And the L is love. I don't mean romantic love, but I do mean wishing people well. For 2 reasons. First of all, I think absolute honesty may not be what we want. I mean, my goodness, you look ugly this morning. Perhaps that's not necessary. Tempered with love, of course, honesty is a great thing. But also, if you're really wishing somebody well, it's very hard to judge them at the same time. I'm not even sure you can do those 2 things simultaneously.
Okay, so now he's given us a list of 4 things, but put them in an acronym. Do you remember what they are? Without even saying the word. The word was what? Hail, honesty, authenticity, integrity, love, right? A lot easier to remember them, those 4, when there's an acronym associated with it.
So hail. Also, now that's what you say, and it's like the old song, it is what you say, it's also the way that you say it. You have an amazing toolbox. This instrument is incredible, and yet this is a toolbox that very few people have ever opened. I'd like to have a little rummage in there with you now, and just pull a few tools out that you might like to take away and play with, which will increase the power of your speaking. Register, for example. Now, falsetto register may not be very useful most of the time, but there's a register in between. I'm not going to get very technical about this for any of you who are voice coaches. You can locate your voice, however. So if I talk up here in my nose, you can hear the difference. If I go down here in my throat, which is where most of us speak from most of the time, but if you want weight, you need to go down here to the chest. You hear the difference? We vote for politicians with lower voices. It's true. Because we associate depth with power and with authority.
Interesting.
That's register.
Now, it's a good, anytime that you can say something that then visually or verbally, in this case, you can demonstrate, where we can all be like, oh, I get it. That totally makes sense. I see the difference there. So that could be verbally what he just described there. It could be the type of thing. He could do some type of exercise where he has the audience do that. Okay, I want you to speak real high. I want you to speak out of your nose. Now I want you to speak out of your throat. Now I want you to speak from your chest. And trying all of those different things and let the audience kind of feel what those things feel like. So good exercise that he could do there, but again, letting the audience sense what the difference is versus just like telling them. It's kind of interesting. Have you noticed, like, when you speak from your nose versus when you speak from your throat versus when you speak from your chest, it all kind of sounds different. Like, I guess, maybe, but he actually does it, and it gives the audience a chance to be like, yeah, I totally get what he's saying now.
And we have timbre. It's the way your voice feels. Again, the research shows that we prefer voices which are rich, smooth, warm, like hot chocolate. Well, if that's not you, that's not the end of the world, because you can train. Go get a voice coach. And there are amazing things you can do with breathing, with posture, and with exercises to improve the timbre of your voice. Then prosody. I love prosody. This is
okay. So he talked about the register, talked about from nose, throat, chest, right? And he talked about timbre, and I'm not entirely sure what that is, right? Other than it's just kind of a smooth voice, but he didn't demonstrate it in the same way that he demonstrated the register. So it feels a bit more gray, murky to me. So again, the more you can demonstrate, the better it is for the audience to understand.
The sing-song, the meta-language that we use in order to impart meaning. It's root one for meaning in conversation. People who speak all on one note are really quite hard to listen to if they don't have any prosody at all.
So again, giving the example of it, and the audience will be like, yep, got it, that makes sense. I can think of someone who talks like that, or that I understand even as you're talking like that, how annoying it can become very quickly.
That's where the word monotonic comes from, or monotonous, monotone. Also, we have repetitive prosody now coming in, where every sentence ends as if it were a question. When it's actually not a question, it's a statement.
Good example. Again, given the example.
Repeat that one over and over, it's actually restricting your ability to communicate through prosody, which I think is a shame. So let's try and break that habit. Pace. I can get very, very excited by saying something really, really quickly, or I can slow right down to emphasize. And at the end of that, of course, is our old friend, silence. There's nothing wrong with a bit of silence in a talk, is there? We don't have to fill it with ums and ahs. It can be very powerful. Of course, pitch often goes along with pace to indicate arousal, but you can do it just with pitch. Where did you leave my keys? Where did you leave my keys? It's a slightly different meaning in those two deliveries. And finally, volume. I can get really excited by using volume, sorry about that if I startled anybody, or I can have you really pay attention by getting very quiet.
Yeah, very good.
Some people broadcast the whole time. Try not to do that. That's called sodcasting. Imposing your...
Okay, let's look at what happened so far. Okay, so at the beginning he gave us 7 different habits that you should not be doing as a communicator, right? Do you remember any of those 7? 2 of them? Maybe 3 of them? Gossip, complainer. I'm trying to remember the images. I'm drawing a blank on them. Yeah, okay, so I got 2 out of 7, okay? Now, do you remember the next one? There's 4 of them. Hail, right? Honesty, authenticity, integrity, and love, right? Because it's an acronym. Got all 4 of them. Batting 100% there. Guess not. I got 100%, not batting 100%. And then, moving on. And then he just gave us 6 more things, right? Do you remember those 6? Probably get the timbre part, register, pitch, pace, volume, and paucity, maybe? I think, ish. Now again, we're up to, what is that, 17 different individual keywords that he's given us. What are the chances that you are going to remember all 17 of those when you leave or when you finish watching this presentation? The odds are very, very, very small, but if you just double down on one key thing, or again, if you use the acronym for one key word, the hail part was the part that we all remembered the quickest and the easiest, right? Because it gave us some type of association that we could help us to be able to recall it.
Sound on people around you carelessly and inconsiderately. Not nice. Of course, where this all comes into play most of all is when you've got something really important to do. It might be standing on a stage like this and giving a talk to people. It might be proposing marriage, asking for a raise, a wedding speech, whatever it is. If it's really important, you owe it to yourself to look at this toolbox and the engine that it's going to work on. And no engine works well without being warmed up. Warm up your voice. Actually, let me show you how to do that. Would you all like to stand up?
Good. I like this. I like where this is going.
I'm going to show you the 6 vocal warm-up exercises.
Now, one of the things that he's doing well here is that he's doing this later in his talk. So at this point, he has been speaking for, let's see here, he's been speaking for about 8 minutes or so, and it's got a couple minutes left in the talk. So he's fairly far and deep into the presentation. So at this point, he's earned a lot of trust with the audience. They've laughed, they've nodded, they're with him, right? So he's built some trust and some rapport that gives him the opportunity to then do some type of exercise like this. I'd like everyone to stand up. Now imagine if he had done the exact same thing at the beginning of the presentation. He comes out, he delivers his first line. I'd like everyone to go ahead and stand up. And they're like, you just got out here. We have no idea who you are. We have no idea if we should trust you, if we like you. We have no idea any of these things about you. But because he's further into the talk, because he's built that rapport and reciprocity with the audience, now it gives him the ability and authority to be able to ask them to stand, and they're all in on it.
That I do before every talk I ever do. Anytime you're going to talk to anybody important, do these. First, arms up. Deep breath in and sigh out. One more time. Very good. Now we're going to warm up our lips, and we're going to go bop, 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 bop. Very good. And now, just like
so, okay, all these things he's doing, these exercises right now, imagine if that's the thing that he opened with. Hey, my name is, what's his name? Julian, and I'm really glad to be here. I want everyone to stand up. Okay, everyone raise your arms. Everyone, bop, 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 bop. There's a very high likelihood that that's not going to work because he doesn't know the audience. The audience doesn't know him. But in this case, he's built that rapport. He's built that authority and trust that gives him the ability to do this.
A kid. Now your lips should be coming alive. We're going to do the tongue next with exaggerated la, 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 la. Beautiful. You're getting really good at this. And then roll an R. That's like champagne for the tongue. Finally, and if I can only do one, the pros call this the siren. It's really good. It starts with we and goes to or. The we is high, the or is low. So you go wee, or wee. Fantastic. Give yourselves a round of applause. Take a seat. Thank you. Next time you speak, do those in advance. Now, let me just put this in context to close. This is a serious point here. This is...
Now, it's also anytime you're doing some type of exercise, you've had everybody stand up, everybody does some type of exercise or some type of activity there, and now everybody sit down. There's going to be a little bit of commotion there that you've got to plan for. So notice what he just did. Okay, everyone have a seat. You can still hear some murmurings, everybody's sitting down, chairs are being folded, all of that's happening. You can hear some laughter whenever he said you can use this in your next presentation. So there's a lot happening there. So one of the things that he says to try to bring them back in is now this is serious. Right? So let's go back here. So watch what happens. That's
like champagne for the tongue. Finally, and if I can only do one,
listen to the
pros
background.
call this the siren. It's really good. It starts with we and goes to or. The we is high, the or is low. So you go wee, or wee. Fantastic. Give yourselves a round of applause. Take a seat.
So he has him applaud, have him sit. There's a lot happening. People are going to be snickering. People are going to be sitting. There's going to be movement and motion. And then he's going to try to bring them back in. So that's tough to do. So watch how he does it.
Next time you speak, do those in advance. Now, let me just put this in context to close.
So they're kind of laughing.
This is a serious point here.
This is a serious point here, right? So they're all kind of moving around and kind of getting settled, resettled, regrouped here. Now this is a serious point here. So he's trying to bring them back in. We just did this fun activity. Now we're going to shift gears very quickly. So he's saying that statement to get them back on track.
This is where we are now, right? We speak not very well into people who simply aren't listening in an environment that's all about noise and bad acoustics. I have talked about that on this stage in different phases. What would the world be like if we were speaking powerfully to people who are listening consciously in environments which were actually fit for purpose? Or to make that a bit larger, what would the world be like if we were creating sound consciously and consuming sound consciously and designing all our environments consciously for sound? That would be a world that does sound beautiful, and one where understanding would be the norm. And that is an idea worth spreading. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Good job. All right, there you go. Hope you enjoyed that speech breakdown. As always, don't forget to comment below and let us know what is the one takeaway that you are going to be applying to your next presentation or talk. Also, let us know if there's other speeches, talks, presentations, TED Talks, whatever it may be that you would like for us to break down in an upcoming video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. We really do appreciate it, and we hope to catch you next time, my friends. You're awesome.